Good evening and welcome to this month's Whisky Me live tasting. I am your host as usual, Tristan from Whisky Me. Thanks so much for joining us on this sunny evening in the UK. We're super excited to be tasting two fantastic whiskies this evening. We're going to begin as usual with this month's Scotch single malt whiskey, which is from a distillery we've never featured before. I think it's the 50th distillery that we have featured in Scotland on Whisky Me in the last 6 or 7 years. And that is anCnoc. Well, Knock Do, the distillery, which we'll get into very shortly. We're tasting peat heart, of course, which is one of their peated expressions that hopefully you have received and perhaps began to enjoy. To take us on the journey through the story of this distillery and through the whiskey itself, we are very happy to be joined by anCnoc's master blender, which is Stuart Harvey. Stuart, how are you doing? I'm good, thanks. I'm good. Good to see you. And thanks so much for coming on this evening to talk to us.
No problem.
Cool. So I think probably this is a distillery that a lot of people will be aware of the brand. They'll have seen the brand anCnoc. It's one of those brands that stands out that everyone's kind of aware of. And I think it's partly due to the strange non-capitalization of the first letter and then the capital, the larger C in the middle.
Yeah.
But I don't think a lot is, we don't hear a lot about this distillery. For me, it's sort of one of the ones you don't hear much about, probably because the brand is more famous than the distillery itself. So it'd be wonderful, maybe if we could get a little bit of a potted history of the distillery and
sure.
Some insight into that.
Yeah, well, maybe to first of all explain the difference between Knock Do Distillery and anCnoc. So basically, what happened was we launched a single malt called Knock Do, which was actually a 23-year-old in a black bottle, similar to the peat heart bottle. And basically, there was another distillery which you've probably heard of called Knockandu. Which at that point in time was owned by J&B. So basically the directors of J&B basically contacted our directors and said, we think this is a bit confusing. Could you chaps please change your name? So yeah. So basically we said, okay. So we went for the Gaelic, anCnoc. So basically Knock Do, anCnoc means the same. It means Black Hill. And that's actually what we've got right behind the distillery. There's a kind of really big kind of hill that sits there. During the autumn, it's covered in heather, so it's really, really kind of dark and quite an amazing character. And that's where we actually draw the spring water from as well. We bring the spring water down from the Black Hill down to the distillery in the village of Knock. So that's why it's called Knock Do and anCnoc. Okay. So basically, Knock Do Distillery was established in 1894. So basically 130 years ago. It's a very small traditional distillery. Basically, from our point of view, basically it was owned by United Distillers. Basically up until we bought it, and basically it was too small, it was too traditional, basically wasn't big enough for United Distillers requirements, so they were actually going to shut down the distillery, mothball it. So in 1989 our company stepped in, bought the distillery from United Distillers, bought maturing stock from them, and basically we had an agreement with United Distillers that they would take some of the production from Knock Do, and basically we would actually get grain whiskey in exchange.
I see.
Because we don't actually have a grain distillery just now. We used to have a grain distillery at our main site in Airdrie, but it closed in 1985. So that was really the kind of main reason to buy it, was one, to get our own malt distillery sort of re-established, and two, to basically got Portland Das and Cameron Bridge grain whiskey in exchange. So that was really the kind of the history behind it.
Yeah. And so you were bottling a blend there, were you, with using the grain? What was that?
Yeah, well, basically it was Inverhouse. Was the Inverhouse Distillers as the kind of production side of the business, and then obviously International Beverage as the kind of bigger parent company. So basically Inverhouse Green Plaid was the blend that we were bottling at that time, which was quite a big blend in America actually. So that was the main kind of driver behind it. But I think we won a watch. We got an absolute gem of a distillery. Produces fantastic whiskey. We have stuck by the traditional methods. So we're one of the few distilleries that still have worm tubs.
I was going to mention that. Yeah, not that many, are there?
No. I think there's officially 14 within the whole of the Scotch whisky industry. Still have worm tubs, and we have 5 malt distilleries and 4 have worm tubs. So it's very, very important to the character of the whiskey.
Perhaps you could, because they're going to mention every now and again on these live tastings, perhaps you could briefly just sort of explain, first of all, what a worm tub is and what it does to the character of a spirit.
Sure. So basically, a worm tub is the traditional way of cooling malt whiskey. So it actually goes right the way back to the kind of illegal distillation. So basically when the farmers were growing the barley, they would then harvest. They would then go up, find a nice glen with good water. They would basically have their little still with them, and then a tub of water with a copper coil in it, and that was basically your condenser. So this is a much bigger version of that. So basically we have 100 meters of copper coil. So basically we're coming out of the line arm basically into the copper coil, and it starts out off roughly about 40 centimeters diameter, so quite a wide diameter, and then basically narrows to about 10 centimeters at the end of the 100 meters. So it's a very slow way of condensing the spirit. It's also a very gentle copper contact, so you don't really strip out any of the sulfur compounds from the whiskey. So basically our new make spirit is really, really complex. So we've got that lovely, fruity, floral, fragrant, citrus aromas, which is very typical of Knock Do. But then when you taste it, it's got a lot of depth, a lot of body to it. So we don't want a clean new make spirit. So I'm looking for some sort of meaty, vegetable type aromas in there. So basically when we mature in the American ex-bourbon barrels, obviously the charcoal layer on the ex-bourbon barrels interacts with those sulfur compounds, and then we basically get that nice toffee butterscotch flavor and aroma coming from those sulfur compounds. So to me, it adds a lot of complexity to a whiskey.
It's surprising when you start looking at the distilleries that use worm tubs, and you're like, oh yeah, I like that distillery, and I like that one, I like that one. And there's definitely I think with all the different stages of whiskey production, from the barley itself through to whether it's peated and fermentation and yeasts and still shape and everything, and yet this one thing, the condenser, can have a major impact on the character of the spirit that comes out the other end.
Yeah, I mean it's much cheaper to run a shell and tube, and that's really why all distilleries would have had worm tubs originally, and then in the 60s basically we got chemical engineers into the whiskey industry, and they said, well, this is really inefficient, it's not good heat exchange, if you like. So they introduced the fine bore copper tubes to basically give much better.
They take up less space as well, the shell and tubes, don't they? They're a lot smaller.
Absolutely, much more easier to maintain, cheaper to maintain. You can get a leak in a worm tub, and it's very difficult to find, so you can get losses. You have to maintain them very, very carefully. However, to me, the shell and tube will strip out all those sulfur compounds, so it makes a very clean new make spirit. However, to me, you lose that depth, that complexity of the body, which you taste from anCnoc, and I think that's what people find very surprising about anCnoc. When you nose it, it's got a lovely top end, really fruity, floral, fragrant, and people are expecting a kind of a light Speyside, if you like, and suddenly they've got this kind of real big kind of depth taste to it. It's a fantastic whiskey.
So speaking more about peat heart itself, then,
Yep.
is there? I presume there's a sort of ancient history of making peated whiskey at Knock. But this is a more sort of recent innovation, doing peat for a short period
Yeah,
of the year.
it's probably a kind of reintroduction, if you like,
Yeah.
from our point of view. So without a doubt, there is a peat moss right next to the distillery in the village of Knock. Like most distilleries, we had our own maltings, we had our own kiln on site. So you can actually, if you visit, the Knockdhu distillery, you can see in the kiln. You can actually go onto the floor and look at where it was kilned, and you have the nice genuine pagoda that used to be used from the kiln. But yeah, like many distilleries, it stopped malt production many years ago. However, they would have used the local peat, going back in history, certainly in the early 1900s, to basically just help dry the malt and barley, and obviously it gave the peaty, smoky flavours that we have just now. So basically 2005 was when we reintroduced heavily peated malt to Knockdhu. It was really driven from a blending point of view, to be honest with you. We had a demand for heavily peated malt. We were finding it more difficult to obtain heavily peated malt from other distilleries. We do exchange with a lot of other distilleries, but people were holding on to their heavily peated malt. So we decided we would produce our own heavily peated malt. So I went up for the first production. Gordon Bruce, the distillery manager, was there, which some people probably met. Gordon's quite a character. So we kind of looked at the first spirit run. We thought we might have to change the cut, because sometimes you've got to change the cut when you start producing heavily peated malt.
Interesting. In what way would you change it? You putting more heads in or more tails in, or
exactly. You sometimes, depending on when the phenols come off. So obviously you've got 6 different phenols within the spectrum. So you've got 2 different phenols, 2 different creosols, 2 different glycols. So they're like every other compound in whiskey. They're different weights. They come off at different points in the spirit run. So we thought we might have to go on spirit slightly earlier. Fortunately, we didn't. We kept it exactly the same. So the spirit run is
cool.
Identical.
I like that though. That's interesting that your cut time are the same. Peated or unpeated, because at least there's a sort of control to the experiment then, in a way,
Yeah. So yeah, you tend to get like the kind of the lighter, smokier phenols coming off first, along with the esters, your fruity, floral, fragrant, citrus aromas, which Knockdhu's well known for, and then your kind of heavier, creosols in particular will come off later on. From our point of view, we're also using peat from the mainland, so quite close to the distillery near Aberdeen. And what you tend to find is you get a smokier whiskey. So you're not getting as much of the sort of heavy creosols and glycols as you do from Islay, for instance. So it gives to me, top end.
Sorry, I was going to say, I find it kind of sootier than like an Islay, where you get more of that like iodine kind of thing going on,
Yeah. You tend to have more of the kind of heather roots and the peat from the mainland, so it does give you that kind of smokier up front. I mean, to me, you get that nice smokiness to start with, but it's not hiding the typical Knockdhu character. You still get that really nice fruity, citrus, honey coming through. And to me, it tastes a lot more peaty than it noses.
I'm going to put some comments up, some tasting notes from some of our members, because some good ones here. But you can carry on talking if you wish.
Yeah. So basically, Gordon and I, decided, we would start filling some, some nice, interesting casks. So, some first fill bourbons, second fill bourbons, really just to have a wee experiment and lay it down for future single malt. So that's what we basically did. So you're looking at it's all American oak, which again I think is really nice because it lets you see the full character of Knockdhu. You obviously sometimes with the Spanish oak, you can really get more of those sort of tannins coming through and competing with the phenol character as well as the natural character. We also went for, it's natural colour, it's 46% unchill filtered. So to me, I agree with that. Add a wee bit of water there to open it up. It is got quite a lot of fatty acid esters in the Knockdo New Make Spirit. So again, it links to that kind of depth and mouthfeel that you get from it. So without a doubt, I'll add a wee splash of water now just to open it up. And obviously, what you can see when you add the splash of water, you get those oils coming out on the surface of the whiskey. You're breaking the surface tension. You're releasing more of those aromas, more of those flavours.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, if I was going to compare it to another famous smoky malt, I'd have to go with Kalila because that has that lemon and smoke. Although, albeit an Ireland or Islay whiskey, I feel like this has that nice sort of finesse between citrus and fresh, sort of fragrant qualities, and then obviously a backbone of smoke there as well.
Yeah. I think it's got a nice balance to it. It's not completely dominated by the peat. I think that's why I like you've still got that, DNA from Knockdo that you recognise. Now, if you tasted the 12-year-old with against the peat heart, you would still recognise, the character that we're getting.
Yeah. Cool. That's amazing. Thank you. Well, look, if you don't mind, Stuart, I'd love if you could hang on for 15 minutes while we talk to Luca from the Lakes, because you might have some questions for him as a whiskey maker yourself. So let's bring in Luca and we'll move on to the Lakes. Hey, Luca.
Good evening, everyone. Hi.
Hi. Good to see you, man. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. All good.
Oh, no, it's our pleasure entirely. Well, thanks so much. Hope you enjoyed listening to Stuart there.
Absolutely. No, it's always a pleasure to listen and to talk about whiskey. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, totally. So let's move on to the Lakes. Now, this is as I mentioned before, we've never featured anCnoc before. But the Lakes we have, I think it was either 3 years ago or 4 years. It might have even been 4 years ago. I think it was the middle of COVID, like in the middle of the first bit. And we did Balmask, Whiskey Makers Reserve Balmask, which was, I don't know. Can you remember what the deal is with that one? It was some weird casks, I think. Maybe it was port or.
Balmask is a part of one of the limited edition single malt. There was mainly influence from some French oak, but also some ex-sherry cask. So, as one of the expression that we have in the limited edition, that was. The inspiration, Balmask is a French word for like mask gala. You see the silhouette of the lady on the label. So we wanted to recreate something like almost like some notes of a slightly spiced cognac, let's say, or brandy. Okay, something a little bit more like unusual, probably from what you can expect from a whiskey, let's say from a single malt whiskey. So that one was, I think, probably late. I think one of the earliest that was probably early 20. Middle 2020. Mid 2020.
Yeah, I think maybe we did it after. I don't know. Brian's saying it's September 2021, and I feel like I want to believe him because I don't think he would make a statement like that if he didn't know it for sure. But anyway, we're getting off topic slightly. So anyway, it's good to come back to you. And I was saying to Stuart before we started, and I think I might have put it in the email and probably various other places. That I love the Lakes. I do think it's the best English distillery we have at the moment. Though, of course, only just in England. It really is only like 25 minutes from the Scottish border, of course.
Yes,
but it's I love what you guys are doing there. I love the sort of experimental nature of what you're doing, and yet it's kind of grounded in tradition and doing things the right way. And I'm always excited to try new stuff from you as well. And one of my favorite things is that you bottle stuff at decent strength as well. Because this whiskey is 52% that we're tasting tonight, which is I mean, it's a good drinking strength. Of course, that you can add water to it and take it right down. But I like that. So maybe if you just want to, for anyone who's not familiar with the distillery, just give us a 3-minute pitch on the lakes, its history, and what you're up to there.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, we are an English whiskey distillery. We started in 2011. Okay, so just a bit more than 10 years ago. We are in the Lake District, so that's why the name Lakes Distillery. And we are just a few miles away from Cockermouth. So Cockermouth, let's say, is the nearest village. And we are just next to Lake Bassentwaite, okay? So as you said, less than half an hour and you are in Scotland. Obviously, being in Cumbria, so we are just in the far north of England, but every time I need to go to the distillery, and I'm based in London, in just basically less than 4 hours from London, I can be at the distillery, okay? So it's not actually that far, okay? So we started in 2011 when our two co-founders, Paul Curry and Nigel Mills, had this dream of build and start an English whiskey, okay? Why in the Lake District, okay? So Nigel Mills, local entrepreneur from the Lake District. So Paul Curry used to go quite a lot in the Lake District, and they both found the Lake District the perfect, location, the perfect place with the right, weather condition, let's say microclimate for also aging whiskey, okay? At the same time, not too far from Scotland. So let's say looking at Scotland as a source of inspiration, obviously because of the heritage of Scotch whiskey, but being in England. So 2011, the journey started, but because the building that we found as ideal location for the distillery was 1850 dairy farm, okay, so listed building. So it took us 3 years to complete the distillery, which was open in 2014. And actually this year, in December, we're going to celebrate 10 years since we ran the first distillation, okay? So it's going to be this year. So 2014, distillery open, we start distilling. And I would say for the first 2 years, okay, let's say until 2016, of course, we were distilling, and we were already testing some of the liquid to see how it was evolving, the liquid, okay? But I believe one of the important, key dates in our journey was when in 2016, our first whiskey maker, Daval Gandhi, joined us from Macallan, okay? And Daval, as a first whiskey maker, okay, is the person that basically start working on the liquid and define then the style of the single malt that we know today, especially for the Whiskey Maker Reserve, so sherry-led. At the same time, Daval, being a very creative person, wanted also to have a bit of freedom, okay, with experimenting with different casks. So we also started what is called, what we know as a Whiskey Makers Edition, so limited edition, that they gave you the opportunity to Daval to, as I said, experiment with different casks and to be like free, okay? And the first one was the Whiskey Makers Edition Coleta. And the first single malt from the Whiskey Maker Reserve, so our core, let's say, single malt, was launched in 2019, okay? So basically 3 years, almost 3 years since Daval joined us. And, since then, we developed both, let's say, line of, let's say, of the products. So we've kept obviously a big focus on the Whiskey Maker Reserve as opportunity for us to understand the influence of sherry cask and also to understand the style of the whiskey maker, of the single malt that we're gonna have one day as a permanent single malt. Okay.
Yeah.
And at the same time, carry on with the Whiskey Maker edition was also not only an opportunity to release something special for our fan, but also for the people that maybe wanted to approach us and they found the Whiskey Maker Reserve perhaps something not for their palate. Okay, so the beauty of the Whiskey Makers edition, I always like to say, imagine when you walk into an exhibition of an artist, of a famous artist, and you will always see each individual artwork. You will never see the same artwork repeated, twice. Each artwork is unique, is individual, is something that we never replicate. So we never replicate an edition. We always move forward, and we learn from the Whiskey Makers editions.
But is the intention, because I know you've done a lot of releases, and there's a few guys commenting saying they've been to the distillery. I've been a couple of times, and if you go in the shop, you've got a display cabinet there with all of these different releases. There's so many for a young distillery, but and I understand your point to, you're kind of creating a portfolio of products, like a body of work. But you've reached 10 years old now. So are we expecting a sort of permanent 10-year-old release going forward, or are we going to continue down this sort of route of like every year we get a new thing of this and that and the other?
So since January 2023, so last year, Daval left us and we were joined by our second and current whiskey maker, so Sarah Burgess. Okay, so because obviously Sarah started working on his, project, and what we just released like on 25th of April is the last of the Whiskey Makers editions created by Daval, Galaxia. I don't know if you had the chance to see around. It's the beautiful whiskey with the blue, bottle in the blue box. So that represented the last whiskey created when there was still Daval, but also the last of the Whiskey Makers edition. So Whiskey Maker Reserve number 7 that we are tasting tonight represented the last release of the Whiskey Makers Reserve. Okay,
that's it, guys. That's the last of it.
Yeah, and Galaxia is the last of the Whiskey Makers edition. So we closed the first chapter of our journey under Daval, and we started the one under Sarah, so our current whiskey maker. So we will definitely see, let's say, limited edition, but they won't be called Whiskey Makers edition. And most importantly, there will be, I can guarantee you, there won't be so many as we did, because to be completely honest, I found somehow, let's say, the same challenge at some point when I joined the Lakes, because I agree that there were like quite a lot of like release, and I think
imagine all the money you're going to save in like label design fees and things like that. It's millions.
Yeah, no, we like to always like reinvest and to experiment. I think it was like a stage of as I said, the opportunity to experiment and also for the excitement. And now I think we build a sort of like a knowledge, and also with our warehouse, with our cask. So we also with Sarah, that brings like a wealth of knowledge from Macallan, but also from all the 20 plus year that she works in different distilleries. We're gonna focus more on probably less release, but of course coming from Sarah, so they will reflect her style.
Cool. All right, well, look, let's just talk specifically about Whiskey Makers Reserve number 7 then. Obviously we're all tasting it. Remind me of the casks. What's the kind of has this been blended together, and what barrels have been used?
Yeah, so when we talk about the Whiskey Maker Reserve, in general, our whiskey, because our style and what makes us different from the other, whiskey distillery is the élevage. So this technique that we took from the cognac maker in France. So élevage is a quite complicated process that basically allows you to create whiskey with a deep layers of flavors and complexity without focusing on the age statement. But because sometimes
it's kind of like blending and maturing at the same time, basically.
Yes, absolutely. But still keeping the liquid inside the cask, okay?
Yeah.
So some people say it's the same of a Solera. Say, well, not really, because we don't focus on the age of each liquid, but more on the profile, okay?
Yeah.
But definitely this happens when the liquid is still in the cask, okay? So for the number 7, for example, okay, we know that mainly the influence of the cask comes from, first of all, 2 types of oak. So we have Spanish oak and American oak, okay? That they've been seasoned with the 2 types of sherry, so the main ones, so Oloroso and Pedro Jimenez, okay? And we also have a certain quantity of red wine cask. This is like for the Whiskey Maker Reserve number 7. Mm-hmm. As you previously mentioned, bottle at 52%. For all our whiskies, including the blend, we don't add any caramel to adjust the color, so it's a natural color, and also we don't do any chill filtration. So this is just a natural color from the aging and from the élevage. I just want to say, for those maybe of you, or for the people that they the opportunity of tasting, or they have maybe home the number 5, the number 6, and the number 7. I think those 3 whiskey, for me, they are a great example of the élevage, but also of the the way we understood the style of the whiskey that probably in the future we want to have as a more, let's say, like permanent, okay, single malt, because all of them, they've been bottled at the same ABV. All of them, they have pretty much the same background of cask, so Spanish oak, American oak, seasoned with Oloroso, Pedro Jimenez, and also some red wine cask. However, those 3, they all display, differences, and obviously some have a little bit more like notes coming from the influence of the Pedro Jimenez cask, and another one more the spiciness. And I think number 7, being the last one, okay, of the Whiskey Maker Reserve, is a good balance of all of them, but especially between the 5 and the 6.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice. I love it. It's very intense on the cask character, especially at that strength. And I think because I just put a little bit of water in it then, and it opens it out so much.
Yeah.
It's funny actually. I kind of fetishize this high bottling strength, but actually when you take it down to 40%, it's really, really delicious. It's a lovely whiskey, but that intense cask sort of structure to it is really interesting. Over in Food Corner, we've got Liz, as usual, with the suggestions. Banging with strong cheese, blue cheese, smoked cheese, anything that packs a punch, and charcoal. She's even specific on the crackers. How granular we get with this kind of thing on these evenings. Yeah, and then obviously it just heads into a kind of cheese debate, as always. This is an interesting comment. Please don't turn it into an English Macallan. What do you think about that?
I knew it was coming.
all these wine casks. Yeah, it's.
No, I mean, Tristan, if I can just, I can see the comment of Bob Sander. I mean, I understand like the comparison with Macallan. I think if we look at what we release, so far, except for very, very limited release that we've done for some, let's say, private bottling, okay, or I'm just thinking, for example, last year when we done 2 release for Selfridges, okay, that they were just a little bit more pricey, and obviously now Galaxia, because Galaxia is the very limited in quantity. We always release whiskey that they pretty much they were around or less than £100 as a retail price in the market. So now I understand that today some of these whiskey, especially the limited edition, they are worth like much more money, okay? But because this is like the market of whiskey, and especially for the whiskey collectors. But I think we always, our aim is to make whiskey that people can afford it. Okay, and from the cost point of view, yes, I understand that maybe our whiskey is a little bit more like pricey compared to others. Okay, but we also trying to so far maintain a focus on British products and also British packaging made in England. So talking about number 7, but also like the previous whiskey. So the barley that we use for the production is only coming from UK. Okay, so we don't source any barley outside UK. Obviously, the water from the Lake District. But then looking at the packaging, okay, that sometimes is where brands decided to maybe, especially when you talk about big volumes, to save a bit more money, okay, because it makes a difference. But the bottle is produced in Yorkshire, and the packaging in terms of like labels and also the box, okay, for the retail for each of our bottle comes from England. So I would say that the only things that we have, when you look at the bottle number 7, the only things that doesn't come from UK is actually the cork.
Yeah, and obviously all the wine casks, but that is going to change soon, I reckon, because as I understand, you've just been bought by Nightimber. Is that correct?
Yeah. The acquisition from Nightimber has been completed, and this has been announced this morning from the London Stock Exchange. That acquisition is now completed. So we are part of the Nightimber Group.
You got wine casks on tap. It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not able at the moment to say anything or to share any information because this is something that
there's going to be a lot of English wine casks knocking about the distillery. We just know that, right?
I think wine at the moment is. I like to say that Sarah is very open to experimenting with different casks, even something that probably would be very unusual for whiskey. But I'm sure there will be probably something about English wine cask. Absolutely, but let's see.
Yeah. Let's see. Cool. Well, let's see. Look, guys, we'll wrap it up there, I think. But that was a fun tasting, and thanks so much, both of you, for your knowledge and insight. Oh wait, we got one question here. I'm just going to put up. I think this must be for you, Luca. Do you source barley locally? Is it a Lakes ingredient, or is
it's
it
not locally? We just say like from UK because we don't actually use any. I mean, local from, let's say, from the Lake District. Okay, I can confirm that the barley that we use comes only from UK because the company that supply us with this barley source a kind of like blend of barley around UK, and just each year, depending on the harvesting and the condition, just creates the blend of the barley with the characteristic that we are looking for, and just for the consistency of our products. So it's not locally, but comes from UK, but nothing outside UK.
I'm not sure there's much barley growing in the lakes. It's pretty hilly, and if it's not a hill, it's a lake.
No, not really. Exactly, not really. Not really.
Cool. Well, look, let's leave it there. Thanks so much, guys. Stuart, thank you again for your
expertise.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
It was really good to chat with you. And Luca, appreciate your time as well, and joining us on this sunny evening. I'm assuming it's sunny where you guys are as well.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So I'll let you get back to the sun. We'll all get back to the sun with a whiskey glass in hand. And thanks everyone for tuning in as usual. We will see you next time.